Hey guys, Jarrod here. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos. You'll notice my hair is all screwed up. I'm going for the just got out of bed look. Truly, I've decided to hell with gel. No more spiked hair, no more nothing. Just gonna keep my hair relatively short like this, and that's that. What does that have to do with anything? Absolutely nothing. So let's jump right on in to today's special Saturday video. So I figured, since I've been going absolutely crazy at work coming up to the end of the year there, that I couldn't have reviews coming every single week, so I decided, you know what, maybe I'll do a vlog or two. It buys me time to get some reviews done for you guys. So what I wanted to talk about today was something I find kind of interesting anyway, and that is what it was like supporting the Underdog system. Sort of like, how did you sort of defend your purchase back in the mid-90s if you bought a Sega Saturn in 1995 and 96, 97? And so what I thought would be kind of neat was just to talk about a couple of games, games that have already been reviewed, but just games that I really wanted to just talk a little bit about and some of the memories behind them. I've had a lot of people write in asking for more personal stories of the Saturn days, so I figured, well, what the hell, I'll go ahead and do something like that. So, you know, supporting an Underdog system, and I don't even want to say defending, really supporting it. When I purchased my Saturn and it came with Panzer Dragoon, I had a really good time with it. Panzer Dragoon was one of those games that was unique, and it sort of set the Saturn apart. Whereas Sony was touting, you know, games like Ridge Racer, Wipeout, and we were starting to see Crash Bandicoot slowly but surely coming together. And we had Nintendo that was really focusing on Super Mario 64. It was different to have sort of like an arcade-style shooter at a time when arcades really were starting to move away from popularity. They were just starting to not be as popular as they were just a few years earlier during the Street Fighter II resurrection of arcades. So people's tastes were slowly but surely changing. And I should have grabbed Panzer Dragoon, I don't know why I didn't, but whatever. Going into the Saturn, we had already experienced a lot of Sega CD games, or at least I had already experienced a lot of Sega CD games. So it was cool to see that Working Designs was going to be, you know, shifting gears and moving towards the Saturn. I thought that was awesome. And again, I didn't grab any Saturn games. I don't know why. But for every one Saturn game that you would experience that was really unique, really special, there were about 4 or 5 other ones on the North American Saturn library that really didn't hold up, that were either rushed or they just felt incomplete. And games such as Virtua Fighter, the first Virtua Fighter, felt really broken. Even Daytona, it didn't look as well as the arcade, which made sense. I mean, right? These were still the days where arcade hardware was vastly superior to home console hardware. But there was still something inherently disappointing about this. So when I got my hands on Panzer Dragoon, it was cool. It was a unique experience. It wasn't in arcades. I had nothing to compare it to. It clearly could not be done on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis or the Sega CD. So it felt like something original. And that was the start. But what happened when, like, Sony released this right here, Crash Bandicoot? The whole gaming industry was sort of split, okay? There were 3 different ways 3D were being tackled. There were this way, that Naughty Dog was basically putting together a 3D world, but your character was really limited either in this sort of motion towards the screen, or a left-right sort of like Mario style for their platformer. We all know Super Mario 64. I don't actually have a copy here to show you guys. But Super Mario 64, fully 3D, right? You can run anywhere, do anything sort of deal. And then we had this, which was what, this is sort of what Sega was focusing on. And I'm not going to talk about years these things came out or anything like that, because it doesn't really matter. It just matters that, you know, while Sony fans had Crash Bandicoot, that they were really hyping up and really playing and really experiencing and loving and you know, basically making fun of everyone else. Sega was really pushing this Nights into Dreams game, which was a really different approach. Again, it was sort of harnessing their arcade days, like their glory days, wrapping around this platformer in sort of a three-dimensional space, but still 2D. It was really, really unique. I mean, you can watch the review of Nights into Dreams if you'd like for my full thoughts on it. But as a Saturn fan, that was something that I used to really show a lot to my friends. Now you have to understand that I'm one of the lucky few out there that has owned every single platform, home console since the NES. Every single one of them. I've been lucky enough to purchase. There were a few exceptions, like the 3DO I didn't buy at launch. It didn't look interesting to me at all, and given the price. And there were a couple here and there, but of the mainstream ones, I was very lucky and fortunate enough to have purchased all of them. So when I say that, you know, like those that were lucky, that were, you know, talking about Crash Bandicoot, I was one of them, right? Like this is my original launch copy. I was excited from, you know, the magazines and stuff, and I ran out and I picked it up. Now, the thing was, though, that I mentioned this in many other videos, that I gravitated towards the Saturn for everything. I mean, it was the first next-gen home console of that era, of the 32/64-bit era, that I got into. So obviously, you know, it was one that I just gravitated towards. It's just the way it was. So when this came out, I was really stoked. I mean, I was hyped. This was awesome, you know? Like, I was like, wow, like, we don't have Sonic, but we don't need Sonic. People tend to forget that a lot. Everyone was like, well, where's Sonic, where's Sonic, where's Sonic? And yes, back in that era, I too was like, well, where is Sonic, right? But it was cool to see unique games like Nights into Dreams. Burning Rangers would come later on from Sonic Team, and so on and so forth. Like, they did some really cool stuff. Now, obviously, we all know that, you know, for every one unique game on the Saturn, there's probably 35 on the PlayStation. But it's sort of interesting to me that Crash Bandicoot was one of those games where, you know, Sony really, people started to associate Sony with this mascot. And it was funny because I would always mention Nights into Dreams just because it was such an original game. At least I felt it was an original game for the time, and it really got just totally destroyed by Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot. And as you all know, Crash Bandicoot would go on to have, you know, a lengthy series, and Mario, well, Mario is Mario, right? But another one that actually came out earlier than Crash Bandicoot, at least I believe so, I think so. Yeah, what am I saying? I think so. It's in a long box. Hello! Resident Evil. Now, Resident Evil, I've mentioned this countless times. This was one of the games where I have so many stories of this. That was where I officially sort of left the Nintendo fanboy camp, was at that time, because I was growing up, right? And this was a mature game, literally a mature game. It dealt with mature subject matter that I had never experienced before. I mean, up to that point, about the most gruesome game out there was something like Mortal Kombat, you know? But with this, it was more than just, you know, like ripping out hearts and stuff like that. Now you actually had like a mature storyline, and that was what really did it. That's where I was like, you know what, I think I'm done with this whole Nintendo thing. And it didn't hurt that, it didn't help that Nintendo was just taking forever releasing games. Excuse me. And Sony was like, it was like one after another, after another, after another, after another. But everybody forgets that you also had that Underdog platform. You also had the Saturn. And yes, you know, today people they're like, there was a Saturn. Sega had a system during the PlayStation 1 era. But they really did. And there were some really excellent survival horror games that were released at that particular point in time, one of which just so happens to be Resident Evil. And a lot of people forget this, that this particular game was on this platform. And yes, it was a year late, so that surely didn't help. But I like the fact that, you know, it contained extra goodies and things like that. Now, obviously, this is my original copy of Resident Evil that I bought way back in the day. And this is my original copy of Resident Evil on the Saturn that I bought way back in the day. And these two games are amazing. I love the series so much that, well, obviously, I purchased both. But it was cool to see that Sega was also trying different things, right? They also had... oh my goodness, what was it, Deep Fear? I think that's what it was called. Their own unique take. I reviewed the import of that a number of months ago, years ago, I don't even know anymore. And it was cool. It was cool to see that, you know, we were getting into a very unique time in video game history where games were slowly but surely becoming more and more mature. Now what's interesting with the Underdog platform, I remember that, you know, everyone, and myself included, I was so stoked for like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Dino Crisis, and you know, so on and so forth. But there were still some games on the Saturn that did piqued my interest. It's such a shame that Deep Fear never was released in North America. It's such a real shame about that. But we did have games like D and Enemy Zero, titles like that, which were, you know, grounded in reality. Well, reality made them more mature. And it was cool being able to say to my PlayStation friends, hey guys, you know, you really should try this Enemy Zero game out. It's pretty cool. And yeah, whatever. We'll just, you know, play Resident Evil. And even when this game came out, I remember I had a couple of people over, and when I was playing Resident Evil when they came in on the Sega Saturn, and they were all like, "What is this?" Because you could tell right away that you're like, "There's something off with the Sega Saturn version." And I'm like, off because it's a little different, right? It's not 100% the same as the PlayStation one. But you know what ended up happening with these guys? They actually came in and we spent an entire night going through Resident Evil on the Saturn. And we did that because they had never experienced anything sort of like that on the Saturn. The Saturn wasn't supposed to be able to do 3D. It was supposed to be some 2D thing. Even though I had already shown people Panzer Dragoon and other games, that one, when they saw Resident Evil, they were like, wow, you know, there may be something to this platform after all. And it was around that time when I started importing like crazy for the Saturn, all the Versus games from Capcom, there was the Darkstalkers games, there was all the SNK fighters, and just, you know, you name it. And all of us were like hardcore into this at that particular point in time, and it was really fun. You know, like it was cool being able to show people something that they wouldn't experience because nobody owned a Saturn. There were so few people who owned a Saturn, and being able to show people that, you know, like, yeah, this Underdog system actually has a lot of really awesome games on it that you don't even realize. And of course, you all know that when this big, huge game was released on the PlayStation, it basically changed everything, myself included. I mean, this was around the time when even I was spending the bulk of my gaming time on the PlayStation. But there was still something that would always draw me back to the Saturn, always. And it was around this particular point in time when we were starting to see titles like this, Shining the Holy Ark. This is probably my favorite game on the Saturn. I absolutely love this game. It was the very first remembering game I did on the Saturn way back when, and at least I think it was. It was such a unique game, and if you've ever played Golden Sun, you know that Camelot is pretty cool. Like, their games are pretty cool. And well, this is where one of the games where they started. It's not the game that they started, but it's one of the games where they started. And you can hear like some of the audio cues are the same, the graphical style's the same. Such a really good game. And it's the sequel to Shining in the Darkness, which was a Genesis game, which was a first-person dungeon crawler RPG. Very good game. And like I said, so I was enjoying Final Fantasy VII. Do not get me wrong. I love Final Fantasy VII. And I basically ate up that hype like no one's business. But this really, really impressed me for its time. And then, of course, you all know the big one. I mean, this is like one of the holy grails of gaming, which is Panzer Dragoon Saga. Panzer Dragoon Saga, I may not be as big a fan as some of you guys out there are. Like, I know that there's people that are like, it's the best RPG ever made! Very, very good game. No question about that. Really excellent game. And it was one of the games where in 1998, I remember I was playing Resident Evil 2 in the beginning of the year. I was playing Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid, and I was playing Panzer Dragoon Saga. And it was an amazing time. It was just an amazing time. And it was funny because supporting the Underdog system back at that particular point in time, everyone thought I was insane. And I remember finishing up watching like the credits go for Panzer Dragoon Saga and sitting back and being like, you know what, Saturn, you were a good system. Because I knew at this particular point in time that it was the end. And yes, Working Designs had Magic Knight Ray Earth come out a little bit after. But the point was like, this was it, you know, like the writing was on the wall. We were already hearing about Katana, if not Dreamcast at that point in time. Katana was the project name for Dreamcast. And I just, you know, I sat back on the sofa and was just like, yeah, like this is it. That's kind of a shame, no? Like it was an interesting point in time. And having supported the Saturn for all those years, well, for all those years, 95, 96, 97, 98, but 98 really doesn't count because there's so few games that were released. It was special to me, and it still remains very, very special to me. Sort of like the Wii U, I think, today. The Wii U is completely underrated, completely written off. Nobody talks about it. Nobody, like, it doesn't even exist. To so many people, you have your PlayStation 4 and your Xbox One, and that's pretty much it. So the Wii U, in essence, is the Sega Saturn. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very similar. Hell, sales may even be similar. And there's just something special about supporting the Underdog, especially when you're one of the only ones who is supporting that particular platform. I know now, even today, Steven and I talk frequently, and we say about the Wii U how, like, you know, it's just a shame. There's some really excellent games on there that no one plays. No one will experience those probably for years to come. And the Saturn was the same thing. Some of these games I showed, such as Shining the Holy Ark here, you will never play this. Like, this will never be released on some sort of compilation disc. This will never be put out on, you know, like the PlayStation 4 or something, and like, ooh, try Shining the Holy Ark. And it is a crying shame, you know. And the same with the Panzer Dragoon Saga and Panzer Dragoon series as a whole. You're not going to be able to experience this. I mean, maybe one day, right? I never say never, as they say. But the truth is that even if you were to experience those things today, it's not the same. It will never be the same. You'll never be able to go back to a point where everyone was talking about Nintendo and everyone was talking about Sony. No one was talking about Sega. And I got to experience these things. I got to play these games when they were new and show other people and make them basically say like, wow, that actually, you know, geez, that actually looks really good. Enough for them to go and buy a platform? No, they're not going to go out and buy a Saturn, and clearly, because that never happened. But it was nice to experience that at that point in time and say, you know what, you know, yeah, this system may not be selling like gangbusters, and yeah, you know, Sega may have threw in the towel too soon, but there were some amazing titles on the Saturn. And to get you guys to just talk, what are some of your favorite Saturn moments where, if you did experience back then, where you were proud to own this system, even though it didn't sell, you know, super well, there were still like those few games that you went to and you were like, you know, I'm really happy I own this because I can't get this experience anywhere else. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm not sure if we're going to do another vlog next week or if we'll be back to regular reviews, but either way, thanks for checking us out as always, and well, see you all in the next video.